Hey y'all, welcome back to Exile Wargaming, where today, and as always, we're going to be talking about winning with Harlequin, specifically when allied with Drukhari in the Reaper's Wager Detachment. Now, the game we have going today is the first game we got on the board, and it will be against the new Space Marines, Rabute Gilliman himself, and the Ultramarines. Now, first things first, let's go over the list. Now, this is a Drukhari detachment, so we are losing a lot of the extra capabilities we got in traditional Eldari. No more unparalleled foresight, no fate dice. We are pretty much just using our Harlequin specific data sheets at this point in time, but knowing who we are as a community, knowing that we are predominantly based in the Harlequin world, I want to make sure we're including as many possible units as we can. So we have a Solitaire. We have 3 Troop Masters, one of them with the Reaper's Cowl, giving our big 11-man unit of troops infiltrate and stealth. We have 2 more troop units attached to those troop masters that will both be accompanied by Star Weavers. And then we have 2 units of Sky Weavers with Haywire and Star Bolus afterwards. Now, on the Drukhari side of things, we are bringing an Archon with the Arc Raider attached to a unit of 10 Incubi inside of a Raider that will be getting 9-inch Scout. We also have Drazar attached to a 5-man unit of Incubi, Lelith Hesperex attached to a 10-man unit of Witches that will be split inside of a Venom. We have 10 Cabalite Warriors that will be split in a Venom as well, and a unit of Reavers. Now, when we first put this list together, I do not know what happened, but we ended up going 10 points over, and I thought we were at 2,000 points on the nose. So at this point, we would not be able to play something like the Reavers, but given the strategy that we used to implement them in this game, it could have been literally anything else. It could have been a succubus, just something to be able to come out of strategic reserves and possibly score secondaries or hold an objective late in the game was the role for that unit, and we could have filled that with anything else. Now, by no means is this the first or the last iteration of this list. This is our first kind of approach at the Reaper's Wager. Opponent is bringing Rabute Gilliman himself and the Ultramarines. In the last data slate update, they got a pretty phenomenal glow up. Not only does Oath of Moment grant +1 to wound against anything shooting against that target, but Gilliman himself now gets to use 2 of his major abilities. So he gets to double Oath of Moment targets and give free stratagems. Beyond this, a few of the data sheets got some pretty nice new abilities as well. So our opponent is bringing Rabute Gilliman, Uriel Ventress, captain with Honor Vehement, and a traditional captain. Now, Uriel Ventress and the captains will be attached to one of 3 Assault Intercessor squads in 3 Impulsors. Now, there is also a Justiciar attached to a 6-man Blade Guard veteran unit, and an Apothecary Biologist with Fire Discipline attached to a 6-man unit of Aggressors with Bolt Storm gauntlets. With Oath of Moment's new +1 to wound, these aggressors, I feel like, and my opponent feels like, may be the clear-cut option to attach Fire Discipline to, as opposed to something like the Eradicators now. It just allows them to be a much bigger catch-all type of unit than the Eradicators themselves. Now, our opponent is also bringing a Lieutenant with Combi Weapon and the Artificer Armor for some lone op, and a unit of 5 Intercessors to sticky the home field objective. Now, Intercessors also got a really big glow up. Each one of them can get an extra 2 shots when firing at the same target. As long as they don't split fire in the shooting phase, it's almost like all of their weapons have 4 shots apiece plus a grenade launcher or 2. That's a big change to that unit. And we're also seeing a glow up in Reavers. So our opponent's bringing 2 of them. They have Scout 6 inches and a whole bunch of Strength 4, -1, 1 damage AP shots. And they also have the ability to shut off your opponent's OC at any point in time. So we're going to see what the new Space Marines can do. This is the first game we're going to be using Drukhari Quins on the board, and this will be the first game for our opponent utilizing some of the new rules and units coming from the Space Marines. But this list itself is totaling at 13 total units at 2,000 points on the nose. Now we're going to be playing Warhammer at its finest. Mission A, take and hold, raise banners and tipping point on terrain layout 2. So getting into the deployment phase, we noticed that we were going to outdrop our opponent by a substantial amount. I believe 3 or 4 units. So what we want to do in this phase, especially trying to figure out what we're getting into, is deploy using our standard sort of symmetry, but also to put them in a predicament right off the bat when the game starts. So the first way that we're going to do this is by infiltrating this unit of Harlequin troops up here on the top. We're going to back them up with a solitaire as well, just in case our opponent decides they may want to advance in charge or whatever it may be and tie up this unit on the first turn. We can heroically intervene. We have fight on death. There's a whole bunch of different options that we can get into depending on what our opponent wants to do. Now, we don't want to infiltrate them all the way up to this objective and give our opponent something easy to engage with on turn 1, but we do want to give ourselves a solid amount of options. So the first thing that we did this later on in the game, but this was the forefront of our minds when we were deploying, is we infiltrated this big brick of Harlequin troops with devastating wounds in the troop master up top here. We have our raider with the Archon and 10 incubi right here as well. We notice that our opponent's army is very focused on kind of efficient combat without a lot of long range shooting. So my thought is, if they get to go first, we could still scout this raider up to this objective on turn 1 and then put them in kind of a conundrum for turn 2 afterwards. Now they could bring this raider down, but they're going to have to expose a bunch of units to our shooting afterwards anyway. So this felt like the best place I can put it for now against our opponent. Now, if this was against any other army, who knows what we would have done at this point, but we gave ourselves the option to move behind cover as well. We have a Star Weaver with a Troop Master and Sky Weavers up top here to just back up this flank and continually contest our opponent's natural expansion. And then in the mid board, we have Lilith so that we can threaten some heroic intervention and fights first toward the midboard if our opponent wants to come out here and challenge us towards this direction. We have a unit of witches right along this side of the board as well, just to do objectives, or we can get onto the center field if we draw something like area denial the first turn. Anyway, just a trash unit to throw away. We have a unit of Cabalite warriors split up in a Venom down here. Some of the Cabalites are on the home field objective. The ones with just rifles, the ones with the big guns are down here. And then we have Drazar's unit next to them. So we can bring out the Cabalites from this Venom, get on this objective, score raise banners, whatever it may be, force our opponent out with them, and then we can embark Drazar's unit into this Venom and get some more mobility afterwards. So down here we have Incubi with Drazar and Troop with the Troop Master and a unit of Cabalite Warriors, and then whatever we may need to flex over here as well. Everything else is pretty standard for what we like to do. Instead of like a Yvrain brick of fights first Harlequins up here, we're going to use Lilith and her Venom and some other trash units to back it up. We have a unit of Reavers in strategic reserve. Now our opponent decided to deploy somewhat similarly, but the Reavers infiltrated, or I'm sorry, got right up to the line so they can scout and start getting into position to score on the early turns. Now, I don't know if this is the optimal way to use Reavers. They seem like a pretty solid luxury, being able to steal objective control from their opponent later on in the game. I think these may have been better suited to hold back, especially with the volume of attacks they have. They can do some pretty good work into Incubi or Troop anyway. So I feel like our opponent may have misplayed these, but both units of Reavers are right up here in the midboard. This one can come onto the center objective. This one can push out to our natural expansion afterwards. And then there's a unit of Blade Guard Vets with the Judiciar over here. Rabute Gilliman is back here with regular Intercessors. And then the 3 Impulsors on this sections of the board with the Assault Intercessors Captains and Uriel Ventress here afterwards. Our opponent wins the turn 1 dice roll and gets to go first. After making our scout moves, the Reavers come up here. These Reavers end up moving over here, and our opponent positions onto this objective. In the first turn, our opponent drew extend battle lines and establish locus. Now, they opted not to establish locus. We have this raider here that we scouted up with our 10 incubi inside of it, and our opponent is going to raise banners with the intercessors on their home field objective afterwards. Everything else pretty much stayed the same. He shuffled up the Blade Guard vets and he shuffled up the Reavers into this section of the board. Looks like trying to maybe screen the Blade Guard vets. Or if maybe we charge the Reavers with the Incubi, then he can heroically intervene with the Blade Guard vets afterwards. So it kind of destroys our ability to do anything super impactful with this unit on turn one. I do not see a big unit of Incubi being able to take out an entire unit of Blade Guard vets and the Reavers at the same time after getting striked on first. So our opponent did a pretty solid job. They're going to end up scoring 5 on extend battle lines and then pitching establish locus. And I believe their Oath of Moment target is this raider and this unit of Harlequin troops, if they can bring the raider down afterwards. In our turn one, we end up drawing Overwhelming Force and Cleanse. So we're going to keep Overwhelming Force because we absolutely could get that on the bottom section of the board. We end up bringing out our Harlequin troops. They disembark. They run up to this section of the board. They end up getting right up to this. Here, they cannot shoot the Reavers. I think one of them was able to throw grenades or shoot a fusion pistol in on this corner. And then the Star Weaver is going to push up as well so they can re-embark afterwards. The Cavalite Warriors got out of the venom that was back here, get onto this point. They don't have any real targets to shoot, but they are going to raise banners. And then Drazar's unit gets into this venom, and the venom kind of advances and gets all the way out over here. We end up using the unit of witches that was positioned right here to just advance and screen out this portion of the board so our opponent can't drop those aggressors wherever they want. We move the venom up with, I believe, Lilith, or it's just the venom itself. Lilith got out to do cleanse on this objective. I believe we are cleansing with something else on this objective down here as well. And then our unit of Harlequin troops ends up pushing up to this objective, being that our opponents already had a turn. We're going to hold this, force our opponent out, and we have the Solitaire right here to heroically intervene. Now we measured our threat ranges. These Skyweavers and the Starweavers should be perfectly fine. What we are doing is setting ourselves up to attack our opponent in waves. If both of these units are able to come out and charge us, sure, they may wipe this Harlequin brick, but they may take a few licks in return. We do have the ability to fight first and heroically intervene at the same time. So we hopefully can do a lot of damage if our opponent chooses violence. This Raider is just going to move up in position. Afterwards, this Venom is empty. So if our opponent does bring down the Raider and they bring down some of the Incubi, whoever's left over afterwards, we can just pop into this Venom if we needed to, or at the end of the fight phase, if our opponent chooses to kind of push forward. If Lilith doesn't get engaged, we can put her back in the Venom afterwards and react wherever we need to. So this is just about giving us as much flexibility as we can. We end up putting the Raider here so that if our Incubi get out, if he blows up the Raider, we can get out close to this wall, and if we position well enough, if our opponent chooses to engage them, they will automatically be within engagement range of Lilith herself. So we're just trying to set up ourselves for some protection. I'm not entirely sure if this was the best way to use this Raider. I'm sure it wasn't, but we'll see how it pans out. In the fight phase, Harlequins with reroll ones to both hit and wound are able to bring down the entire unit of Reavers in combat before they have an opportunity to do anything. And then our Harlequin troop is just going to get back in the Star Weaver afterwards. So we are going to get 3 on Overwhelming Force and 4 points on Cleanse. Opponent's turn 2, they end up drawing Bring It Down and Recover assets. After this, they really just choose violence. So they call Advance and Charge for their entire army and just start pushing everything forward. They end up moving up the lieutenant with combi weapon here just outside of the deployment zone to recover assets, and then they're going to recover with this intercessor squad down here, and they're going to hope to bring down some vehicles as well. The unit of aggressors, there was nowhere really beneficial to put them. They could have put them over here by themselves, but he ends up dropping them up top here near Gilliman so they can get their extra AP and whatever else they need for free to put them in Devastator Doctrine if they need to. So they end up dropping down up here. The unit that was staged in this impulsor here originally ends up advancing, and I believe this is this front unit here. They get a pretty good distance, and then the unit behind gets a pretty good range as well. This impulsor comes out, ends up putting a bunch of shots into this unit of Harlequin troops. A lot of like frag storm cannons and the Bellicaris. It was like 3d6 blast shots, and then one other weapon, I think a heavy stubber as well. With stealth, which was very nice, they end up bringing down 4 of our Harlequin troops in shooting, and I believe they may have thrown grenades as well. Down low, they called this Raider as the Oath of Moment target first, and then this unit of Harlequin troops the next afterwards. So the aggressors end up bringing down this Raider without any issue at all. The Blade Guard vets move up, the Reavers move up as well, and the Reavers themselves and the Blade Guard vets are able to drop a substantial number of incubi very, very quickly and handily. We are left with 2 incubi and an archon afterwards. So we do get them here if our opponent rolls even a decent roll and they have to get into base-to-base contact. Lilith is going to be in here. She is pushed all the way up against this wall, which is less than an inch from them. Afterwards, our opponent puts some other firepower wherever they could. I believe not much happened as they didn't have a ton of different angles. In the charge phase, our opponent ends up moving everything forward. They push the Reavers into combat with the Incubi. They push the Blade Guard vets into combat with the Venom and the Incubi. End up getting into engagement range with Lilith, who uses Heroic Intervention. They end up pushing this unit of intercessors with Uriel Ventress all the way up and ends up getting an engagement range with the Solitaire, which was nice. So we end up getting 2 units of fights first over here, and then the other unit of assaults intercessors punches back here. Now, I misspoke earlier, and the Oath of Moment target was not this Harlequin troop up top here. It was the Incubi inside of the Raider. So at the end of it all, our opponent is able to bring down all of the witches that were able to bring down the Reavers, and they're able to bring down all of the Incubi up here. That 2+ invulnerable save on the Archon did not do enough work to make it happen, but Lilith is going to walk out pretty unfazed. She's able to bring down 2 Blade Guard veterans. Now, up top here, our opponent again did choose violence, and they're able to wipe out the entire squad of Harlequin troops, minus the Troop Master, but we are going to fight on death. We rolled very well on the fight on death. I think we ended up swinging back with 7 of them and had a very, very good hit roll and wound roll afterwards. Combined with the 9 attacks coming from the Solitaire, we do a hefty amount of damage. So there is a lot of destruction on this board. We'll see what it gets into. Everything dies. It was one of the most violent turns I've seen in a very, very long time. So he's able to bring down 11 Harlequin troops. We use fight on death. We end up getting to swing back, I believe, with 7 of them. We roll absolutely bonkers with sustained hits to come back, and we clear out all of Uriel Ventress's unit and all of another unit minus this sergeant that survived with a captain over here. So the Solitaire was able to do some really good work into this unit. We brought down 4 or 5 of them, but Uriel Ventress ended up surviving, and the Solitaire walked away on 1 wound, and then the Troop Master walks away untouched afterwards as well. So at the end of this turn, there is a ton of aftermath, and we're just going to see who can walk out on top. Now, in our turn 2, it's pretty much a brawl, and all we can do at this point is try to clap back as best we can. We end up drawing Bring It Down and Defend Stronghold. So we should be able to walk away with 5 to 7 points in secondary, but really we just got to hope that we can clean up whatever we can right now, because these aggressors and Gilliman and another unit of Space Marines with a captain and assault intercessors and another unit of intercessors are still down here, and each one of these units could be a pretty big threat to us afterwards. So we end up falling back with the Solitaire. We end up falling back with Lilith. We at the bottom use Advance in Charge to move up a Drazar in the Incubi. Then we move up the Venom as well, so they can re-embark the turn after, and then we move up our troop that disembarked from the Starweaver all the way up here to try to get into fusion pistol range of these Blade Guard vets and the Starweaver as well, again to re-embark. We move both units of Skyweavers out and up to try to dig into some Impulsors or bring something else down, and then our Troop Master stays in combat up top here, and then our troop with another Troop Master in the Starweaver gets out to engage Uriel Ventress and the last Sergeant. So in the shooting phase, we end up doing some pretty solid work. Our opponent, I believe, used Armor of Contempt somewhere, but I noticed something very particular, and that is that without the rerolls, Skyweavers are not that efficient. I think they are way overcosted when they are not utilizing Unparalleled Foresight, the extra reroll to hit and an extra reroll to wound. Each one of these was only able to bring, I believe one did 3 devastating wounds, another unit did 3 devastating wounds. We had to use, we got 4 wounds through with a Star Bolus, and then we had to fire, I believe, the Bright Lance from down here into this unit afterwards to try to finish it off. So it took a lot more firepower than it typically does to bring down something as simple as an Impulsor. Lots of 1s and 2s getting rolled, and without those rerolls, it just wasn't that efficient. Now, this unit of troops in the center ended up bringing down 2 of our Blade Guard veterans, and then we fired our Venom in as well. The Starweaver, I believe, ended up going into one of these units. It was one of the Impulsors. So one of these Skyweaver units fired into this and did 3. Another unit fired in and did 3. The Starweaver did a pretty good bit down here afterwards. So we are able to bring down 1 Impulsor. We are not close at all to bringing down another one. And we are able to bring down Uriel Ventress and the Intercessor Sergeant up here with just shooting alone. So we did have a pretty good clapback turn. We're going to see what it looks like in the charge, though. In the charge phase, we end up pushing everything up top into the remaining Space Marine captain just to make sure we keep a Troop Master or resource alive afterwards. We even push in the Starweaver so that we are close enough to re-embark all of our troops afterwards and kind of protect them from this Impulsor. These Impulsors can wipe out a whole squad by themselves. They have so much firepower. And while our Harlequin troops are great against elite firepower, given that we have 4+ invulnerable saves, it is not so great against low AP, high volume of fire. So we want to make sure that we're protecting them here. Down here, I would love to give you a little trick, a little tactic to keep you from getting dominated by fights first, but because these Reavers were here next to the Blade Guard vets, the way that we ended up engaging this combat is that we charged the Reavers first, and then we used our pile in order to get into combat with the Blade Guard veterans afterwards. This bypassed the fight first because the fight, our turn in that fight phase had already began. So if you're looking towards engaging fight first units, as long as you pile into them and not directly charge them, because the pile in happens after the combat begins, I believe that's the terminology for it. we get to fight before their ability goes off. And we were able to bring down the Judiciar and the lone Blade Guard vet afterwards. And then the Incubi are able to clean up these Reavers as well. So we are wholly within 6 inches of our Star Weavers and Venoms afterwards. They're all going to get back into these and give us a little bit more transportation protection afterwards. But we walk off, we clear off all of the objectives in the middle. We're going to give our opponent a 5 in primary and walk away with 5 points in secondary. Our opponent's turn 3, they draw no prisoners and engage on all fronts. So now we get to see what Rabute Gilliman is capable of with these aggressors. He ends up pushing up the Impulsor onto this objective with the combi weapon lieutenant as well. The aggressors move up to get into range of both the Star Weaver and the Venom. He calls Oath of Moment on the Star Weaver, I believe, up here, and the other on this unit of Harlequin troops, it might have been the Incubi inside of this afterwards. But he ends up splitting fire with just the aggressors themselves, and between 3 of them going into this Venom and the other 3 going into this Star Weaver, they're able to bring them down pretty handily. So that new Oath of Moment is really, really good on them. They're able to wound them on 4s, and some of the shots are twin linked. It was pretty solid. This Impulsor ends up putting some shots into this Harlequin troop as well, and then the unit of Assault Intercessors and Captain ended up getting out behind this section of the board as well, so they're going to charge whatever's remaining afterwards. So our opponent had a very, very nice clapback, and they are going to out OC us on this objective for the remainder of the turn. In the charge phase, the combi weapon lieutenant goes into the troop master. The Impulsor does not make a charge. The aggressors end up charging into our Skyweavers and bring them down without any hope. And Gilliman does a million wounds to these Skyweavers. The Impulsor ends up charging and tank shocking into our unit of Harlequin troops and is able to bring them down. The troop master was alive, but ends up coming down to attacks from the assault intercessors. And then the Incubi over here end up taking a pretty substantial number of attacks as well afterwards. They are going to fight on death, and we're going to be able to bring down quite a few of these troop or assault intercessors afterwards as well. The fight on death has been very, very nice for us. Getting kind of double activations on a lot of our units may be the thing that really swings this game. So in the aftermath, Drazar is able to bring down almost everything. I think he kills the entire unit, including the captain, with I think 2 Incubi swinging with him. All of our Skyweavers are gone. Our Troop Master is gone over here as well. And all we really have remaining is Lilith, this unit of witches, a unit of Cabalites, a Venom over here, and the Solitaire. And then we have another unit of troops inside of this Star Weaver. So we are wiping out resources at a rapid pace. It looks like we're about to table each other on turn 3. In our turn 3, we just try to collapse everywhere we possibly can. We draw Assassination and Marked for Death. The Marked for Death targets were these Intercessors, I believe this Impulsor, and Rabute Gilliman himself. So hopefully we have enough to start bringing them down. We push this Star Weaver up here. Then we bring the troops out to get into range of these aggressors. Our opponent does not Overwatch. I don't know the specific reason. And then we end up blitzing the Solitaire out this way as well. Lilith pushes up to try to get into combat with the aggressors later. This Venom is going to stay put. And then we're going to move these witches start up as well, or these Cabalite warriors. Our home field objective is stickied, so we're really just going to start pushing the rest of our force out so that everything else can just keep our opponent at bay and contesting. All we really need to do at this point in time, because we had a pretty substantial lead, is keep our opponent from scoring anything in return. We end up bringing these Reavers out back here just because we could, and we know it's going to cause a problem for our opponents. If these aggressors survive, they're going to have to turn around and deal with this. Otherwise, we may be able to start contesting our opponent's home field objective or scoring any good secondaries that we get. If we get engaged on all fronts, or Some of the other ones that involve being in our opponent's deployment zone will be in really, really good shape. Establish locust, something like that. In the shooting phase, we do end up throwing grenades at Gilliman, and I believe we're able to bring down 3 wounds. We are able to bring down 2 aggressors with fusion pistols right here. The troop master over here ends up firing into the lone op. Combi weapon lieutenant with his fusion pistol and ends up doing 3 wounds. So he's going to make it to the combat phase. And then this Venom pushes some shots into here as well. I believe the Starweaver fires into Gilliman, and this unit of Cabalite Warriors into Gilliman as well. He is within lone op range, so this unit is just going to have to fire into the impulsor, and I believe everything bounced. In the charge phase, Lilith and the Solitaire end up pushing into this unit of aggressors, and the Harlequin troop go into Gilliman himself. We are going to get sustained in rerolls, and we're able to bring him down with devastating wounds almost by themselves. Know we're in a Drukhari detachment, but it's always incredible to see a troop master bring down a Primarch. End of the turn, there was not much left over. Unfortunately, Gilliman does not resurrect, and we are left in a pretty phenomenal board state. So our opponent has 2 impulsors remaining at this point in the game and a unit of intercessors. We're going to hold the bottom objective. We're going to be able to contest the center objective. We're going to be able to take this objective. Our troops end up getting back into this Starweaver afterwards. There's just a lot that we can still do to deny our opponent on points, and I don't believe there's really anything they can do to come back. We end up getting 5 on assassination and 5 on marked for death. In our opponent's turn 4, they're really just scraping through to see how many points they can get. They end up drawing overwhelming force and area denial. So they are going to get area denial for 2 points right here in the center, and they are going to end up killing the Solitaire off of this objective here. I believe they just shoot into Lilith and bring her down a couple wounds, and the Solitaire ends up getting tank shocked afterwards. So this impulsor in the center fires into this unit of Cabalite Warriors down here and is able to bring down 4 of them, leaving just the lone Dark Lance afterwards. And this unit of intercessors, I believe, starts to put some shots into this Venom, and they are almost able to bring it down. Our opponent ended up walking out of their turn, scoring 7, 5 with overwhelming force, and 2 for area denial, but we end up drawing area denial ourselves and recover assets. So it was nice being able to bring this Reaver unit back here. I know we were over points, but the only reason for this unit was to be able to do something like this. So even if it was a succubus, we would have been in really, really great shape, and we did have points for that. So we end up recovering assets, and then for 6, so this Cabalite Warrior unit will go for the home field. We'll get one in the no man's land, and then we'll get one in our opponent's deployment zone over here. And then area denial just needs to happen by getting rid of this impulsor. So everything is tying up this impulsor up here. We are contesting this objective with a unit of witches, and we're able to bring down the impulsor with grenades, fusion pistols, and a charge afterwards. By the end of the game, our opponent ended up drawing Cleanse and Defend Stronghold, which they were not going to be able to get. Maybe we can give them Defend Stronghold for 3 points on their turn 5, but we end up getting 15 for taking hold on the final turn with Secure No Man's Land and Establish Locust. So again, just this back unit over here establishing Locust, and we do definitely have Secure No Man's Land with a sticky objective down here and whatever else we may have in the mid board. So at the end of it all, we scored 95 to our opponent's 53. It felt like we could do whatever we wanted to do throughout the entire game, but only once. This army is incredibly fragile, a lot more fragile than what I'm typically used to in Harlequins. Being able to utilize fate dice, for those, extra 4+ saves on our Star Weavers or our Sky Weavers, being able to re-roll a hit and a wound on every unit each turn. It really does kind of take its toll. Also, having access to -1 to hit in the shooting phase in Eldari feels a lot better than -1 to hit in the melee phase in the Reaper's Wager. So this game felt incredibly sloppy. It felt like I was back in 6th grade playing a game against my buddies where we just shove everything forward at each other and hope for the best. I'm glad we were able to come out on top, but oh my gosh, this was a monstrous learning experience. This is not a traditional Harlequin style army. I do not believe this army or this detachment to be super Harlequin friendly, if we're being frank, not as Harlequins are themselves. I had a lot of thoughts on my first matchup here. One, it does feel like quite a bit of a chore to play this. There is so much bookkeeping. There are so many things you have to pay attention to. Who has the wager? Who do you need to have the wager? How many units do you need to commit to a specific unit to make sure that you destroy something to flip the wager, while also not contributing with something you need the wager to flip from? It's so much at once all the time. It really does steal a little bit of the enjoyment away from the game itself, but that isn't a bad thing. I think it's going to get easier with more repetition. Overall, combat feels highly efficient. Troop with troop masters, incubi, witches with Lilith, they all felt absolutely incredible. The mobility was phenomenal. Infiltrate and scout created some really unique situations for our opponent. Right off the bat in this game, I know why our opponent did what they did, because it felt like they had no other option. And we kind of forced them to come out and push everything they could into our army right off the bat. I mean, beginning of turn 2, we advanced and charged everything, and we were off to the races. If he didn't do that, and we were the one gaining the initiative the turn after, our big unit of Harlequin troops at the top towards their natural expansion would have pushed into their backfield. Our incubi would have got their first charges. Then we would have followed it up with a second wave afterwards, and then had enough for a third wave beyond that. So it really kind of puts your opponent in a predicament. And if you can look at their army list and see their abilities, this seems to be very, very powerful. As long as they know that they can't deal with you super efficiently on that first clap back turn. Our strats are incredible. The one thing I did notice is that I wanted to do all of them all the time. And being the first game, it was kind of hard deciding which one needed to be done. I wanted to do all of them, that I could only do one or two of them. And I always wanted to hold up something like heroic intervention or fight on death, just knowing that our opponent was going to come at us anyway. So I didn't use a ton of advance and charge. I didn't really use -1 to hit in melee. I think I used it once. I still wanted to be able to throw grenades. It was a little trickier than we anticipated, but we did end up using fight on death twice. I think that is an excellent resource. We essentially stole 2 turns from our opponent. We heroically intervened in fight on first on turn 2, or fight on death on turn 2, and we were able to bring down 2 assault intercessor squads. The following turn, we wiped out the captains. Because of fight on death and heroic intervention. The following turn after that, Drazar's unit, while it got killed, it ended up trading away for its same number of points. And when we're working inside of a game where our opponents are running a little tighter on the unit number, that is monstrously beneficial for us. So I'm perfectly fine. I have 18 total units. Our opponent has, 11 or 12 or maybe 13. We're okay making those even trades, because by the end of the game, we're going to be able to contest and steal points and objectives later on. So the strats felt incredible. The wagers are very kind of difficult to manage and just predict the outcomes. I really truly believe that Drukhari needs to be the major shooting aspect of this army. The Drukhari has to be the heavy hitter in the shooting phase. And I say this because in the combat phase, our Harlequins aren't super efficient without those rerolls. But with the rerolls and sustained hits, it's like our troops are getting out of falcons and they become very, very good again. The Drukhari, though, themselves don't need rerolls from the wager in the shooting phase because they have their power from pain tokens, and we were utilizing them regularly. So I believe if you want consistent shooting, it has to come from the Drukhari side. If you want to integrate Harlequins into your list, I would do so, from my personal opinion, on my first game. Um, Having them is more of a melee focus. I'm not entirely sold on the 10-man unit of Incubi either, only because once it's done what it's supposed to do, we don't have the stratagem like we do in Sky Splinter Assault, where they can get back in a raider and be protected, or get back behind a wall or a rune. They're entirely exposed, and the Incubi do not survive. That's a very expensive unit. To put this in perspective, to be wiped out by something as simple as an intercessor squad. A 5-man at this point can do a hefty amount of damage into a unit of Incubi if they're not protected. So I'm not a big fan on the 10-man squad. I think this should be something maybe a little bit more impactful in that Raider, maybe the Court of the Archon. I still have to figure out how to use that appropriately. But I think that would be a maybe much more solid option towards that. The Skyweavers are not nearly as efficient as they were in our traditional Eldari detachment. Without that reroll, these Skyweavers felt brutal. I felt like I was wasting 105 points. I wished that they were almost anything else. And to be honest, I wished, because of the way this army is situated, I had taken Zephyr Glaives instead of the Star Bolus. I wished I was able to get them into a more impactful role much earlier. We cannot use them the same way that we do in a traditional Harlequins list. There's a lot that we need to get into here. I think this detachment is great. I think the stratagems are incredible. I think our mobility is awesome. I think Infiltrate and Scout have the ability to put our opponents in some real precarious situations. And if they don't understand how to solve the puzzle, you can just automatically win the game in the deployment phase, which is incredible. But I think this army type will require a ton of practice to make it work consistently. I was out of my wheelhouse here, just unable to predict what was going to come next, and I feel like we can fix it for sure. I don't think anyone has figured out the Reaper's Wager balance just yet. I think there is a case to be made for less Harlequins, more Drukhari, and if that's the case and that's the way this really ends up working, I am perfectly fine and happy, playing my Harlequins in a traditional Eldari style list anyway. For sake of comparison, I am going to run a game with almost this exact list in the Ynnari detachment just to show the difference between the two. So yes, we are going to have Yvrain in the Vizarch instead, but we're going to lose, Scout and Infiltrate, but unit for unit, for the most part, it's going to be very, very similar. And I really want to see the comparison and see if there's a big difference. Right now, I think I prefer traditional Eldari, but it's very, very new. And again, we all love what we're used to. So this game was fun. We ended up running away with the score. We did a great job. It just felt a little bit messy. I am looking forward to getting them back on the table, though. But thank you again. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're getting your Harlequins or Drukhari out there on the table and exploring some new options. I don't think anyone is even close to solving this detachment at this point, and I'm just so excited to see where it takes us. I think when the new Harlequin or the new Eldari Codex comes out, we're going to see quite a few changes to some of the data sheets. At least I'm hoping so, and it'll make this detachment make a little bit more sense. But I do want to call out quite a few individuals from the Discord and our Exile Wargaming community. To each and every one of you who knows what's been going on, I just want to say personally, with my own voice, that you all mean the world to me. You are absolutely incredible. The amount of love and support and patience and kindness that has come from each and every one of you has not gone unnoticed. It's enough to make a guy cry. I appreciate you so, so much. I hope you have a wonderful holiday. Please take care. If any one of you in the Discord needs a single thing from me, I am more than happy to help wherever I possibly can. But thank you again for everyone else. Please like, share, subscribe, join the Discord in our incredible community, and I hope to see you in the next one.